Hi. So I haven't been on YouTube in about 2 weeks, and during that time, I really spent a lot of introspective time thinking about what I've been reporting on. And what keeps coming up when I examine all of my coverage of the Idaho 4 over the last year and a half, there are a couple of things that just don't make sense to me. And there are parts of this case that I don't understand. So what truly keeps me questioning this case is the tracking of Bryan Kohberger's phone. And I don't understand parts of that aspect of the case. And it's not because of the gag order. And I don't understand parts of Bryan Kohberger's cell phone tracking that was talked about during the hearing. And it's not because of what is sealed. It's quite literally because of what was said. If we think back to that May 30th hearing in 2023, when Ann Taylor was cross-examining Corporal Payne talked about how he constructed his, you could say, cast or tracking of Bryan Kohberger. When he was asked how he came up with this information, he said he relied on people who were smarter and more educated than him, and then he dropped the name Nick Balance. And Ann Taylor said to him, "How did you communicate with Nick Balance?" And Corporal Payne essentially was like, "Well, I don't recall," which is probably the right answer. Ann Taylor's question should have been more specific, so she got more specific. And she's like, "Did you talk to him in person? Did you talk to him via text? Did you talk to him via email?" And he said, "Well, the special agent, FBI agent Balance was in the same building. I mainly talked to him in person." And then basically the whole hearing stopped. The whole show stopped. And Ann Taylor said, "Well, I'd like to show you a copy of these text messages that are from FBI agent Nick Balance." So she showed the text messages to Corporal Payne, and Corporal Payne basically had to concede that that's how he got Bryan Kohberger's information was exchanged via these text messages. Now, everybody kind of just forgot about that moment, but I just cannot get it out of my head. So I've done some research, and in order for actual text messages from an FBI agent to be admitted into court, there has to be warrants, there has to be reasonable cause, there has to be a damn good reason why they're taking personal text messages and they are entering them in as evidence. Now, the defense can enter in evidence that they don't have to hand over to the prosecution. And that's kind of what Ann Taylor said. She goes, "I don't want to have to admit these into evidence." But how did Ann Taylor get her hands on Nick Balance's emails? Nick Balance's text messages? How did Ann Taylor get her hands on Nick Balance's text messages? Think about it. Who gave them to her? There were 4 people on the chain, but Ann Taylor said these are the text messages of Special Agent Nick Balance, FBI. So did Nick Balance hand his text messages over to the defense? He was helping the investigation. Would he hand them over? Did he think that there was something in there that she should know? What kind of process allows for an FBI agent investigating someone to just randomly hand their text messages over? And you might be thinking, "Oh, well, that's common practice." It's not. She doesn't have the text messages of all the other FBI agents, and if she wanted them, she'd have to submit in a subpoena. So I've been thinking about other ways she could have got those text messages, or how she could have even found out what might have been in those text messages. I was thinking, what about Batanti? Early on, Batanti was hired by the defense to do kind of background special investigative work to figure out things behind the scenes. What if Batanti had conversations with some of these officers or people who spoke with them and was aware of text exchanges, brought it up to somebody, and they preemptively handed them over to Ann Taylor? I don't know. You guys, what do you think? These messages kind of spooked and shut up Corporal Payne while he was on the stand. He got more concise with his answers, and he looked kind of nervous. When we talk about that May 30th hearing, we talk about right afterwards, Cy coming on. And Cy came on the stand. In 20 minutes of this, Cy gets on the stand and says that this information they were using was piecemealed, it was inaccurate, it was full of flaws, and he also said it was incredibly misleading. And then he went on to say the only evidence he's seen so far against Bryan is exculpatory, meaning it is in his favor. So I just want to fast forward to another thing that I've been seeing all over YouTube, and I've just wanted to kind of give you my thoughts on, and that's the DoorDash driver. I've heard a ton of people suggesting that Bryan Kohberger could be the DoorDash driver. And I want to push back on that a little bit. That theory doesn't really make sense to me, and I'll tell you why. The DoorDash driver reported themselves to the investigators just a few days after the crime. So after that point, we saw a whole series of subpoenas, including the December 2nd subpoenas. The 8458 number, according to these May 30th hearings, was not tracked until December 23rd. Okay? Bryan Kohberger wasn't called in for questioning. He wasn't called in for a DNA sample. If the DoorDash driver was allegedly Bryan Kohberger, as many are suggesting on the internet, they would have had his name long before then. They would have probably asked for a DNA sample, and they would have had a reason to call him in for questioning. They also would have subpoenaed his phone records long before then. And they also would have matched up that 8458 number in the phone records. So you see, they can see the DoorDash driver and all the same information that they can see Bryan Kohberger, or not see Bryan Kohberger. So the point is that the DoorDash driver is easily tracked. And we would have known the name before December 23rd, when they started issuing subpoenas to AT&T and for the track trace. I mean, those subpoenas would have been issued. What I'm getting at is, if the DoorDash driver was involved, they wouldn't have waited till December 23rd to subpoena the AT&T records, the track trace. That all would have been done back at the very latest, the December 2nd search warrants. So for me, I do think the DoorDash driver is incredibly important as a witness into this case, but I don't think the DoorDash driver I don't think the DoorDash driver is Bryan Kohberger. Do I think the DoorDash driver could be involved? I don't know. Like all of you, I'm waiting to hear the evidence. I'm waiting to see how the DoorDash driver ties into all of this. At the very least, I want to know what the DoorDash driver heard or saw that night. And when we're kind of in this spirit of debunking, I do want to talk about Cy for a second. A lot of people have also said Cy is no longer on YouTube because maybe he won't be testifying as a defensive witness for Bryan Kohberger. I just want you all to know, I watch Social Lake Crime Club, and I actually heard them say in their podcast they were taking a break for a number of reasons, but primarily because they had so many cases. They provided a website and a way to keep in touch with them and to keep going on the podcast, but they emphatically told us that they knew they were going to be taking a break. Beyond that, I will just ask you to take a look at their work. There's a reason Cy and Carrie were on YouTube, and it's not just to have a successful podcast. It's to speak about their work, I believe. I'm not speaking for them, but it feels like they're there to show us the good work that they do, and they're there to show us how this work can make a difference. And so, anyway, I just wanted to dispel those rumors that Cy and Carrie aren't on YouTube because of some change in testimony, because that's not it at all. They have a lot going on. So anyway, that's all I really had to say. I just want to catch up with all of you, and I'd love for you to subscribe if you haven't already. I try to put content out daily. And if you could hit that like button, I'd really appreciate it. As a creator, it's the free way you can help me, and it probably helps me more than you realize, and I'd greatly appreciate it. It's the free way you can help me. And lastly, if you could hit that notification bell, because I go live and I don't really have a schedule. So if you want to talk to me live, the best way is to hit that notification bell so you know when I'm going live. And other than that, I hope you have an awesome weekend and happy Friday. And I'll talk to you soon. And peace be your journey.